Daft Punk was one of the most unique and brilliant projects in music. Their influence can be felt not just in other artists, but in film and even more niche things like stage design. That sounds silly, but they did change a lot with that. Their discography is one of the most varied and unique ever, so I thought it'd be neat to revisit their roots with 1997's Homework, the debut album that defined the late 90s house movement. Let's start in the late 80s, an era of major cultural change around the world, but importantly, in Paris, France. This is where classmates Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel de Cristo met and built a friendship on their shared appreciation for music and movies. After a few years of hanging out, they, like most teenagers, would aspire to start a band, so they put up a flyer looking for a guitarist. Out of this, they found Laurent Brakowitz and formed the band Darlin. From 92 to 93, they recorded 4 songs and occasionally performed very small shows. The best way for me to describe this band in a sentence would be, it's exactly what you think it's going to be. An early 90s punk band from the people who went on to make Daft Punk. And let me be clear, that's not fully negative. Darlin is indeed a product of its time, but even with it being so far removed from what the group later made, and it being made when they were all teenagers just doing this for fun, you can put a Darlin track and a Daft Punk track side by side, and I feel most people would see the similarities without knowing any additional lore. It's honestly kind of crazy how distinct Thomas and Guy's production is here. Cindy So Loud has that now iconic repetition. Their cover of the Beach Boys' Darlin is once again made in a way where I can imagine it being sampled by Daft Punk, and most importantly, Untitled 18, which I'll get to in a second. For such a low-key and back then overlooked project, you can really see each member's potential throughout its run. For clarity, let's refresh back to where we are in the timeline. Culturally, the 90s were an explosion of new pop culture phenomenons. Too many to list, but a big one in Europe, particularly in France, would be raves. Going out had always been a thing, but now it was something totally different. The music was overwhelming, they were usually held in tight, crowded places, and the trend would sweep the world over the course of the decade. In 1992, Thomas and Guy began to explore the rave scene, bringing its influence to the Darlin track Untitled 18, their first electronic song. In 93, the band had finally got its first 2 singles released, which brings us to the point that everyone knows. In the magazine Melody Maker, a reviewer slams Darlin's singles, calling them bizarre and a Daft Punky thrash. In most places, you'll see this interview credited as what made Thomas and Guy rethink and move to making electronic music, but that isn't fully the case. While it's true the magazine inspired the name Daft Punk, their interest in electronic music, as stated before, had already been developed, and before the review even came out, Darlin had already been losing its steam, and kinda just faded away after this. In an interview, Laurent Brakowitz stated that Darlin never ended because it never really started. It was a fun project that had its time, but they had all grown out of it quickly. As for him and his career trajectory, after Darlin wrapped up, he decided to go play in a band with his brother instead. That band was Phoenix. What the hell? 2 of the biggest French groups ever, and they just casually grew up and made music together. What are the odds? But moving on, Thomas and Guy would now continue the path into house music, adopting the name Daft Punk, and got to work. Before 1993 even ended, Daft Punk already recorded its first EP and was signed to a label. The New Wave EP would release in early 94 and featured 3 songs. The main track, The New Wave, Assault, and Alive. With the duo being so new to this genre, this project both serves as a great display of their early talent and the group at its most experimental. The New Wave opens as bold and intimidating as possible, with this loud clashing sound looping throughout its 7-minute runtime, both of these details becoming staples of their sound. It becomes punchier and louder over time, turning into something that I just can't put my finger on. I'm not typically a fan of this style of electronic, but I found myself enjoying it here. This track in particular gave me Wipeout vibes. Even though that didn't exist when this came out, it still had that vibe. Assault is an even faster, more danceable track. This thing is a banger, seriously. How you go from Rock Band to this in a year is insane, and personally, I think it's my favorite on the EP. Then the final song, Alive, which is the finished version of the New Wave. To me, it comes off as the most balanced song on the project, and even made it onto the album later. The EP was an instant success, establishing the group's name in the still relatively new genre. The next year, they're back with 2 new songs, Da Funk and Rollin' and Scratchin'. Da Funk off rip shows a major refinement in Daft Punk's style, as it's a lot more structured compared to their earlier tracks. This one builds on itself more progressively to get through the runtime, but also to add something onto the trademark repetition. The B-side, Rollin' and Scratchin', in contrast, is way more of a polarizing track. To many people, it just sounds like noise, but to me, I think it's like a jam. Like, yeah, it's 7 minutes long, but it's 7 minutes of the coolest thing ever. I admittedly slept on it for years, but for some reason, eventually it just clicked. This second single blew the band up to new heights. Da Funk in particular was getting so much attention from fans and other artists that Daft Punk would go on its first tour that year, doing 40 shows across Europe. It was now 1996, and Daft Punk became one of the biggest names in house music off of 4 songs and a couple of remixes, which was great, but a bit scary. This was when the group would start trying to limit the amount of attention they received, coming up with a new strategy for that year's release. For 1996, a new artist titled Indo Silver Club would debut on the same label as Daft Punk. Why? Because Indo Silver Club is Daft Punk. This fake group would drop the tracks Part 1 and Part 2, more of a club vibe here, which the name clearly alludes to, but still recognizably Daft Punk. The move was good at both not pushing away fans and also stopping Daft Punk from being a name that you heard too often. Also, while we're here, Daft Punk did a lot of remixes from this time. Haven't talked about them because they aren't majorly important, but this particular one from 1996, Forget About the World, is one of my favorite early tracks of theirs. If you haven't heard it, I really recommend it. I'd be remiss if I didn't shout it out. In the second half of 96, Daft Punk had finished their album and took it to a new label. Before we get into that though, out of the new label deal, Da Funk was re-released with a new B-side, so let's cover that. Music would be the final pre-album song Daft Punk put out, and it's not bad, definitely one of their more repetitive songs, but by this point the Daft Punk formula was pretty figured out, and I think this song shows that, cause it's more fleshed out compared to everything else they had put out before. In late 1996, Daft Punk's first album was done, and it was titled Homework. The pair stated that the album felt like practice for their future projects, and chose the name as Thomas's home was where most of the album had been worked on. Its cover features the now iconic Daft Punk logo stitched into a jacket, really running with the kinda underground club aesthetic that this album has. In Europe, the album released on January 20th, 1997, and in America on March 25th, instantly launching the band into mainstream success. The album opens with daftendirektour, which means Daft Live in French. This song is essentially a remix of Da Funk. It uses a lot of elements from that song, and it makes for a good intro in my opinion. My only complaint of it is that it's kind of lacking. Like, this track only works because it's an intro. I love it, but put it anywhere else in the album and it's filler, which I think makes it look bad. But as an intro track, it gets you hyped to go into the album, which is all it needs to do, so it's fine. It transitions into WDPK 83.7 FM, a radio skit that plays a little bit of music, and officially starts the album, also leading into the next track, Revolution 909. This song is incredible. I feel like I'm going to end up using a lot of the same words to describe these songs, so apologies in advance. But this song, more than ever, shows how Daft Punk can make a thing and keep a song fresh for minutes on end, despite that thing never really changing. It's almost hypnotic. The song came about in reaction to the French government's strong crackdown on the rave scene in the late 90s. Yes, parties were a national threat. Another neat detail is the title being both a reference to the Beatles track Revolution 9 and the 909 drum machine that they used on it. The next track is Da Funk. Nothing really to say here since the song was already out, but I do want people to train themselves on track sequencing. So far, this album has been perfectly arranged to ease in someone on their first listen. A warm-up track, a bright, upbeat opener, then a proven crowd pleaser. I know I'm making this sound like a way bigger deal than it is, but the important thing is that Daft Punk knows if they have you hooked by track 4, then you're not going anywhere. And track 4 is Phoenix. To me is when this album really starts to take off, pun intended. Another jumpy and fun sounding track that also has this like rapid fire speed to it. Overall, it's a calm track, but it is notably faster than everything so far, which is why I like these slow building albums, because every track is bringing something different to the table, as opposed to every track having the same attributes. This album's sound varies wildly, and I'm glad it does. Something else I came to realize about this album is how a lot of these songs sound perfect for the beach. Like, I know techno is kind of like that in general, but there are a few songs on this album that sound like a soundtrack to just chilling on a beach. I know that's silly, but track 5 backs me up here, as Fresh is quite literally the beach song. Another chill banger, this one being the chillest of them all. The way it opens with those waves and that riff, then the loop. The core of this song brings in another point of discussion, their way of using samples. Daft Punk iconically samples a lot, but what I've always appreciated was how they sample vocals. Here they took If You Leave Me Now, a beautiful but completely different song, and just turned it into this heavenly loop with so little of it, mind you. Like, yeah, it's repetitive, but it's also like 2 seconds of music. It sounds amazing for being so simple on paper. That's because it's not simple, by the way. Sampling scares me, and I have no idea how these guys pulled this off. But yeah, Fresh, without a doubt, one of the best songs on this album, and it sets up perfectly for Around the World. What do I even need to say about this song? For sure the most fleshed out song on the album. It's less of an instrumental and more of an adventure, which definitely fits in with some of their later tracks. It's also basically the only song on the album with real lyrics, which they recorded using a talkbox. Another thing that they would build upon later. Definitely a highlight of the album, so to follow it up, they choose Rollin' and Scratchin'. As hard as I will defend this song, it is a bold ass choice to put it right next to what would become the biggest song on the album. Honestly, I gotta respect it. But yeah, another already released song, so I won't stay on it too long. It is just as good as it was before. Next is Teachers, a special track as it not only pays tribute to everyone in the scene that inspired Daft Punk, but it also is another sample showcase. Using the same sample as Fresh, Daft Punk puts it behind another sample of these drums, and out of it makes another insanely catchy loop. I'm a really big fan of how punchy this song is. It's one of the more bassy ones on the album, but unfortunately all of that is under the shoutouts Daft Punk are giving on this track, and that I just couldn't get into very much. Still a great track, but that kind of brought it down for me. Keeping with the sample trend, High Fidelity is the crowning achievement for that on here. Using the tiniest fragments of 2 Billy Joel songs, once again Daft Punk makes nothing into an entire song. One of my favorites of theirs, as evident by the intro. It also changes a lot, which makes it more unique. The vibe of it entirely is very high energy, but it's high energy in the way that still keeps you pretty calm. It's upbeat, but not bouncing off the walls either, if that makes any sense. Next up is Rock and Roll, a song that I would describe as a more upbeat version of Rolling. I always saw them as very similar, and like that song, I'm a big defender of this as well. I do love the abrasiveness of it. Unfortunately though, with the album having both it and Rollin' on it, and this song being as long as it is, it's one of the ones where I hit a point in it where I get confused why it's still going. That is one of the only problems with this album. I understand these songs were mostly made to be played in live settings, but when you start hitting these super high run times of like 7 minutes, the repetition starts to work against itself a bit. Oh Yeah is another favorite of mine. Again, I love bass, and this has such a heavy feel to it. It's a bit goofy, but with how short it is, I don't mind it really. I believe I also heard the Alive 2007 version of this song before the original, so that kinda already gave me a positive impression of the track, and now I go back to it pretty often. Burden is another calm and groovy sounding track. Again, like Rock and Roll, I feel like this one just goes on for too long, but I do like the opening of it. I just think that there isn't much there besides it. Track 13 is Indo Silver Club, of course the title referencing that whole alter ego thing from earlier. This is part 2 from that original single, and I think that putting this on the album, even though it was already out and most people already knew it was Daft Punk, was a good choice. It fits in really well and gives the album another proven track. For the closer, we have Alive. Again, it was already released before the album, but as a closing track, I do like it a lot more. I think having it at the end works a lot better, and while I feel it's a tad bit too long, it plays out the album, so in that case, it being long kinda works there. Even though Alive is the closing track, the final song on the album is Funk Ad, a reverse section of the funk, which only goes on for a minute. I do like this one, it's definitely neat, but I do feel it's a bit unnecessary. I felt that Alive is a perfectly fine way to end out this album, but this works and is more of a bonus really than anything, so it doesn't hurt the album by being here. And that is Daft Punk's Homework, a revolutionary debut that upon its release basically put Daft Punk in the top of the electronic music genre. Of course, it released to critical praise. Not everyone likes Daft Punk, but the 90s techno scene was pretty diverse, so most people there really liked it. And commercially, the album did even better, selling 2 million copies, with songs like Around the World and Revolution 909 doing well in both Europe and America, which is pretty major for a French electronic group. Like, that having global success is pretty rare. But as we talked about earlier, all this new attention wasn't really what Daft Punk wanted next to their music. So around the time of the album's release, they decided to start covering their faces for media appearances. In interviews, the two would explain their choice by critiquing celebrity culture and idolization. Too much music is sold with face rather than music. That's why you get so much shit. When we came up with the idea of not showing too much of ourselves, we were thinking, wow, you can't do that. So we tried it, just to show that you can do it if you want to, and so far, we've got away with it. With so much already accomplished at the start of the year, Daft Punk would decide to keep going, putting out more of the album as singles, and most importantly, going on tour. Daft Punk had been playing shows for the entirety of 1997, but officially, the daftendirektour didn't start until October of that year. Using the same equipment they made the album with, the two played more than 120 shows, hitting nearly all of Europe, along with America and even Japan. On stage, the tour was very simple compared to what Daft Punk would later be known for. It was just them and their equipment. Hell, they weren't even wearing masks here. Compared to their iconic 2006 tour, this is a lot more laid back, separated a lot from that one, which is more put together and precise. We'd be here for a lot longer if I fully dissected this set list, so instead I'll just give my personal highlights of it. The intro with music and its transition into Revolution 909, love that. They found a way to make Fresh even funkier, how? This very familiar, then unreleased track. This 10 minutes of funk section, when I revisit this set, I usually tend to start at this point, because from here on out, they are locked in. That transitions into Rollin' and Scratchin', which is a lot more gritty sounding here, not only because it's live, but because of this. 10 out of 10. Then there's this part where they're just jamming. Whatever this is, I wish it came out. They mix that into Alive, which then becomes this. Listen to one of these shows if you haven't. This entire tour was light on documentation and is severely underrated now. After I gave it a shot, I genuinely put it in proximity to Alive 2007. It is that good. A heavily cut down version of this set released in 2001 as Alive 1997. It's one 45-minute track. Not gonna question it, just gonna acknowledge it. But after this tour and after 1997, Daft Punk kinda slowed down. I mean, I would too after doing that long of a tour, but since they insisted on staying out of the media so hard, it was kind of like they fell off the face of the earth. Following this, the last single for the album was Revolution, and when it came out in February of '98, it completed another one of the group's side projects. Daft, a story about dogs, androids, firemen, and tomatoes, is technically Homework's companion movie. I say technically because the movie has no plot and it came out in the year 2000. Really, at its core, this is just a collection of already existing music videos, but since it's in one package, I thought I'd kind of save it for the end instead of working each video into the timeline. d.a.f.t's video is about this dog man Charles roaming around New York blasting his boombox. He finds an old friend and tries to ride the bus, but the bus doesn't allow boomboxes. So like a real dog, Charles stays back with his music and the video ends. What the hell does this mean?
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
Gets the people going.
Around the World is a pretty simple one. It's about these androids and mummies just vibing out. Pretty standard. Burden is about this kid living out his dreams as a firefighter, showing him starting with just a toy truck, then saving this entire building from burning down. Few cameos in this one, notably Daft Punk themselves right here, very covered up so you don't know it's them. Revolution is funny. You think they're gonna make the video about a party just like the song itself, but nah, tomatoes. Fresh brings us back to our homie Charles. He's an actor now and even got with the girl from earlier. I like this one, it's shot well, it matches the song, the story's good. Even though Charles is a literal dog and only exists in these videos, he seems like a chill guy. I was genuinely happy for him. And the last video, kinda, is this live cut of Rollin' and Scratchin'. This is literally just taken from the tour video, so I see it as a bonus, but it's there. And that is a hopefully mostly complete deep dive of the Homework album and surrounding era. If you've made it up to this point, I sincerely appreciate you sticking around. These lore videos are so fun to make, especially when they're albums like this that have a lot of character. If you're new here, consider checking out my other videos. This is finally number 20, so I now have a moderately sized catalog of stuff that is similar to this, all kind of explaining and focusing on music stories and moments. If you aren't new here, I of course appreciate your continued support. This one's sort of off my usual focus of rap stuff, but I do love Daft Punk, and since I might possibly make more of these retrospective style videos, I thought that they were a good practice round for that, so I can develop and build up to covering even more historic artists. Leave a comment on this one. I really want to get feedback and use that in the future to make better videos, and I should still have one more lighter rap related video on the way. If it's not out this month, it'll be out right when the year kicks off, so stay tuned for that. Lots more on the way. Stay clouded.